works. And I am going to
Yes.
wait for Zoom and YouTube to tell me that they're talking with one another. But for those of you who are watching this live, as you see the connection go, welcome. This is another edition of Conversations with Mitch Gray. And of course, my name is Keith McNally, or Dr. Keith McNally. You know me, I'm a host of a variety of conversations, and every Monday, as we get the opportunity, Mitch Gray joins me in conversation as we talk about men's mental health issues. And so we missed last week because I was in the North Carolina mountains, um, training for my Appalachian Trail through hike. And so twice this year, I went up to the Grandfather Mountain areas. I'm for some reason drawn to Callaway Peak because Callaway Peak is such a pain in the butt to climb. And so roughly it starts at about 4,000-ish, elevation, feet in elevation, and it reaches almost 6,000. So the hike up is almost a 2,000-foot elevation change. And believe me, it's up through dirt, gravel, rock. It's something else. So I do that even though my daily routine is to push out miles. So 12 plus all the way, like I said, on Sundays, I do a hike out by the Virginia Beach area in the Sandbridge area, and that's a 20-mile to and from. I go to and from Back Bay Wildlife Refuge all the way to the Outer Banks, literally to on the beach, and come back. And so I could push it. I pushed it to 22, adding some extra trail miles, but generally it's about a 20-mile hike. 7 of those are in sand. Um, but I say all that to say that we missed you all for those of you who didn't catch us last week. And I'm hoping now that we are live, Mitch is frozen. Mitch,
I'm here. You're frozen as well. And I lost you.
so our there you go. You froze or I froze. Who's
We
freezing?
both froze. We
We
both
both
froze.
froze. All right,
Yeah, we're back. We're back.
we're back. And so I think if anybody, anyway, I just talked about my experience and why I hike some crazy miles every week.
But the question is, did you camp this time? That's the
I
question.
I didn't camp this time. I am not savvy yet. So, but the goal was really the comparison. I went up there in May and I went up there last week. The first time out there hiking the 2,000-foot elevation change, Callaway Peak, off of Grandfather Mountain, was a kick in the tail. And at
Yeah.
that point, I was only maybe doing 12 miles at best a day. So this was back in May. Since then, I've, do 12 daily. The weekends, I can accumulate 40 miles. So the climb in elevation was nothing. It was
Mhm.
nothing compared to the first time. So last time we talked about the wind. My cardiologist said you're healthy.
Yep.
And I just proved it by hiking Callaway Peak on 3 different days consecutively without any real problems. But that's not
Good
today's,
job.
I appreciate that. That's not today's topic, however. Today's topic is about spirituality. Golly gee, dang on it. How do we get there? Um, I think it's important for our audience to know that spirituality is a part of who we are as humans. Um, Although some of us fail to recognize it. Now, a lot of us may have grown up in a church scenario or a church environment where spirituality is talked about, like Catholics and Christians talk about the Holy Spirit and God and us having a spiritual nature, but we really don't dive deep into that conversation. I think one, out of ignorance, and two, maybe out of fear. Um, so I kind of want to have that conversation with you today, um, with me asking the questions this time and you giving us some
Okay.
insight and then like kind of sharing some ideas, because I think without healing or without understanding spirituality, there is no long term or long lasting healing
Mhm.
if that's what we're looking to accomplish.
Mhm.
So, Mitch, what's spirituality? What is the spirit? How do we figure that out?
So let's first differentiate spirituality and religion. I like to say religion is the manifestation of humanity's search for spirituality. So people are searching for something significant happens in their life, or they're given these mythical belief systems. I don't say that in a way that's being critical. I just say it as that, they're in essence mythical um, by their family or friends or whoever, and it becomes really, really important to them. It becomes valuable to them. That becomes a religious or a ceremonial type function that is now expressing their spirituality. So let's designate that. So someone can be religious without being spiritual. They can just hold to the dogma of religion.
Mhm.
Someone can be spiritual without being religious. They are not inclusive of each other. They don't have to be exclusive either. Many people are very spiritual and are religious. They have their ceremonial beliefs. Maybe it's the synagogue, or maybe it's church on Sunday, or maybe it's mass on Saturday. Maybe it's just keeping certain traditions like the Sabbath and et cetera, other belief system type traditions.
Right.
So maybe they're using those religious experiences to express their spirituality to their God, to their belief system, to whatever their higher power may be. Someone can also take part in those ceremonial practices and not be spiritual at all. So they may believe in the law of religion, they may believe in obedience, they may believe in we practice these things to earn a certain way after this life is lived, after this experience is up. So oftentimes you mention spirituality and people think religion. So I really want to make it really clear that when we're talking about spirituality, what we're talking about, to your question, is the essence of the human life experience. So we look at quantum physics, we look at other scientific data, we look at medical data, and what we've concluded is something definitely happens to the human essence, the human spirit, when we pass from this life experience. There are far too many stories of people that have been on death's door or have medically passed and had an experience. There are too many quantum physics studies that talk about energy, talk about motion, talk about all of these things that we really are still trying to describe. And quite frankly, I don't think we'll ever be able to fully grasp it because it's outside of this human experience. What we do know is we have these experiences every once in a while in this human experience that make you go, something is larger at play than just my feeble human body, its heartbeat, its emotions, and its thoughts. I like to say everything is spiritual because I like to think everything is connected. So when we say what is spirituality, it is the essence, it is the aura, it is the something outside and inside of ourselves that brings about this huge connective piece. That's why I say everything is spiritual and everything is connected, because it's the idea that when something on the other side of the world is going really terrible, I feel it within myself. I feel the compassion and the angst of my human brothers and sisters and friends and family on the other side of the world. And I can feel it as if it were happening to me. That's not physical. That's not emotional. That's something much more. And that's the spiritual that we get into. And so we could go through moments in life where we go, ooh, that's more than emotions or physicality or mentality. That's something else. That's the spiritual that we're talking about.
I think also just kind of one more connection to religion and religious texts. Um, the creation of the physical world, the material world, starts with science has called it the Big Bang. So nothing became something. And so I kind of like to look at it as the spiritual realm, whatever that is, again, without clear definition, we create words to describe what we can't see.
Hmm.
Things start from the unseen and transform. And even we
Yeah,
also use the word manifest these days, um,
yeah,
into the physical, into the material world. And so, if we take a look at the fact that we are spirit first, spiritual first, spirit first, and then understand that through that, there is this creation of the human experience, the physical experience, the things that we
yeah,
can experience through our five senses, including our memory, our ability to think and process information. I think that's where it all comes to. And so, with that in mind, if there is a spiritual component to who we are and what we are as beings, things in existence, because we are more than just a heartbeat, more than just every breath that
hmm
we take. You mentioned that we have a connection. We have some kind of unseen connection. And the first thing, even though you talked about, maybe something catastrophic or traumatic happening across the world that we would connect with, maybe emotionally, but then as a human being, recognize this. The first thing that I thought of was twins. There's been studies of
hmm
twins who
yeah,
are separated for whatever reason and can almost know, think, see, feel what's going on with the other twin,
yeah.
in a way that defies, logic and, well,
hmm
just make common sense. So, and I wanted to kind of open up this or broach this idea that spirit and spirituality are part of our existence because I want men, especially, to become comfortable with that idea. This is going to be the first of not of consecutive, but at least many conversations in the future that you and I will have on this podcast that really pulls in the idea that we have to align the physical body with the mind,
hmm
with our
hmm
emotions, with the
Yeah.
spirit. And I think without that, there is no true healing. There is no true mental wellness. There is no true wellness as the conversations that we're having are all about.
Yeah, you could almost argue that it begins with the spirit, that it begins with exploring and being curious about what else is there. And that's the challenging part is within this human experience, especially in first world. You see this more in first world cultures than you do cultures that don't have all the conveniences. It's really interesting to study and or go visit cultures that don't have the conveniences that we do in the first world because it's almost like they have a bend toward the spiritual more than we do. We're so focused on the tangible, what we can see, touch, hear, feel, smell. Feel meaning with our hands, what we can feel that way, or what we feel even immediately with emotion. We're so attached to those things because they're tangible that we often just ignore and move past the intangible. And that's really what the spiritual is. I've had friends back in my church pastoring days. I've had friends that were missionaries that would go to these other countries and talk about how thick the spirituality was, no matter what it was, whether it was Christianity or witches or Wiccans or other Hindu or whatever it was. They would go to these countries that we would call almost second and third world countries, and they could feel the spirituality as soon as they arrived. They could feel people looking, acting, talking differently because of the spirituality they lived with. And then they would come back to, we're in America, and that's where most of my friends were. They would come back to America and it was just empty, just empty. Um, I was very fortunate in high school to move to a place that was near indigenous reservations. And as I befriended a lot of the indigenous people, even in America, you quickly realize how much many of them, especially many of their leaders, saw with spiritual eyes versus the eyes that we often see within the physical. And
Mhm.
it was very intriguing to me as a teenager. I was like, whoa, what is like this is all the stuff that I had been taught, but had never seen lived. And that was very curious for me. Um, and so I think one of the downfalls we have is we get so caught up in the tangible and what we feel, what we can see, what we can explain, that the mysterious becomes very taboo. And this whole idea of spirituality, why would I ever tap into my spirituality? It's very taboo. It's very mythical. It's very unseen. And so, how do we define and describe that? And so, I would really encourage people, don't worry so much about how to define and describe it. Just simply focus on experiencing it. Whatever you need to define and describe will come to you when the time is right. But just simply focus on the experience of what you're feeling. We used to do things, and this is going to get maybe a little bit radical for some people. Back in my preaching days, we used to do things where we would have silent gatherings and on a sheet of paper. So we used to call them clues. So we would sit in silence for like 20, 30 minutes meditating, and we would all have a notebook and a pencil or a pen. And on a sheet of paper, we would just write the clues that came to us: white GMC truck, or a location, or a specific person. And what was interesting, and we did this many, many, many times, so it wasn't a fluke. What was interesting is we would bring the clues together and we could identify specific locations, specific people doing specific things. Most of the time, people we didn't know. And we would go find those people and we would either pray for them or just visit with them, maybe take them a meal, whatever we felt led to do. So that's a very spiritual activity. It's a very experiential activity. And many people, like the look on your face right now, were a little bit skeptical of what's going on until they experienced it. And then once they experienced it, it was like, oh my gosh, that makes all the sense in the world because we're all connected. It's just that we don't take the time to really bring in that connection and bring in the clues that the universe, God, whatever you want to name this energy, is giving us. But this energy is flowing through us. And so, my point to that story is, number one, it's a great story. It was a great experience. But the point to that story is that's how powerful this energy is. And if it can work outside of ourselves, then it can really work within ourselves. And in some of I've had the privilege of being a part of many experiences in life that way, miraculous experiences. And in my darkest moments, I lean on those miraculous experiences because we're not perfect and we all struggle and we all battle certain things. And in those moments, I can lean on those experiences and go, okay, I may not be able to see what's happening now, but I've seen it before. And so I know it can happen again. And so, whatever that looks like, whatever I need in this moment, that's what I'm going to lean on. But if you don't have those experiences, then what do you have to lean on? And that's kind of my point with people that are very big on religious practice, but not spiritual practice. Is it's like they have the function to lean on, but where's the real experience to lean on?
I we need to do it. That was the only thing on in my
Yeah.
mind is that we need to do that in some way, shape, or form as a part of what we're doing in these conversations and have more spiritually oriented activities or experiences, whatever they're called, whatever we want to call them. But for right now, I think that's a good way of opening up the idea that we
Yeah.
are connected to spirit, that we are spirit, and that is a important part of who we are as just energies of existence. Mitch Gray, thank you so much.
One last thing before we
Yeah.
stop. If you invite the spiritual experience to show up, it will show up in some form or fashion. But it's the invitation. The spiritual experience is always in existence. It's the openness to the invitation. So, just a last thought as we move forward.
So there's no better way of ending this conversation than with that last thought. Last thought, Mitch. As always, I appreciate your time and I was about to say God willing. God willing, we'll see each other next week. Everybody who's
Cheers.
watching,